Should we talk about the groups now that we know what all the groups are?
Yeah.
I mean, they were predetermined as long as RNG got in. There was potentially a small amount of chaos if RNG did not make it, because basically it would have been DFM and Fnatic, I think, that were not sorted into those groups yet because EG had to be in Group B.
Still don't get that part because, like we say, it is possible now to have groups that aren't properly set that way, right?
Well, here's the issue. So DRX, as soon as they qualified, had to be in Group C because it's the only one without a Korean team, right? And then Group D, Royal had to be there if they qualified because there's no Chinese team in there. Otherwise, each of the other ones has those slots. Then EG has to be in Group B because Cloud9 is in Group A, and Fnatic has to be in Group A because there's no other European teams, right? Because G2 is in Group B. So that's why it works that way. But had Royal, for some reason, not qualified, DRX still had to be in Group C because there's no Korean team. And that means because there's no NA team, that's the group without the NA team, because 100 Thieves and Cloud9 were in the other two. EG has to be in Group B, and then it would have been a 50-50 whether Fnatic was in Group A or D, and DFM was in Group A or D. So that's how it works. I know nobody followed that, but basically the groups had to be this way. They had to be this way. As long as RNG was there, the groups were locked. So we do get Group A now with Cloud9, EDG, Fnatic, and T1.
Seems like a decent amount of parity there.
Yeah, I think the question is how good EDG is going to be in this meta. If it's going to continue to shift in the way that we've seen so far towards more farming junglers and potentially carry tops. Flandre was a point of weakness for EDG throughout LPL playoffs. He was like inting some games and looking really bad. Also, they were succeeding in a meta where, you know, Viper could absolutely pop off and carry on these mega carries like Zeri, right? Zeri's not in the meta anymore. She got nerfed too many times. And so can Viper carry this team hard enough? Maybe. He's probably the best AD carry at this tournament. That's on the table. Let's put it that way. But I don't think EDG they still have an outside shot at the World Championship. And the other side of that coin is that T1 should be a lot better in this meta. First off, Caitlyn is incredible for Gumayusi. You know, if Gumayusi can play Draven, Caitlyn, Kalista, he's going to be super happy. Korea was drawing Nautilus bans even in the finals versus Gen G, so that's another consideration that you have to take. Thresh was buffed, and even though we haven't seen that much Thresh, I think only Vulcan has played it so far. That is a long-standing Korea champion that, if it's viable at all, will be really important for him because, again, it also allows him to get Gumayusi out of bad situations. Then you have Zeus being able to play more carry top laners. I assume we're going to see his Jace at some point in time. The only person I think it didn't do great things for necessarily was Owner. Lee Sin is viable. Lee Sin got buffed, but maybe Owner is not going to be the best at some of these farming jungle metas, but I still think it's better for T1 than the last meta was.
I will say, by the way, when LS did his like tier list for Worlds, I don't know if people saw this because people who just paused the graphic saw that like he had like the normal tiers, but then he had like a tier that was way below that had Lee Sin in, and I was like, oh, LS, never change. Never change. I love it. I just love it. I like when people are true to themselves, you know.
I mean, he doesn't like it because it's a Sinner champ, and the concept is that, you know, it's a playmaking champ, and oftentimes it requires positional errors from teams in order to make the plays onto the carries. And so the logic goes, you shouldn't position like that against a Lee Sin. It's user error and not the amazing play of the player. I do think that some Lee Sin players are so amazing that it's very difficult to stop them from doing what they're doing. And Owner, Canyon, these guys are some of those players.
The rough one for me is obviously Group B. Because if you're G2, it's like, the fuck is this? Like, what? We came second. Like, what's our reward? Like, how does Fnatic get, in theory, a better chance than us to maybe get out? Like, what the hell?
Well, you know, my hot take is that we always have one of those Chinese teams that bombs out of groups. And my hot take is JDG might bomb out of this group. And The reason being is that this is a meta that should be much better for Dom1 and G2. Well, maybe not G2. We'll see.
We'll see if Broken Blade holds up.
Yeah, we'll see if Broken Blade holds up. We'll see if Jankos holds up. Like, I always get a little nervous when we get farming jungle meadows with Jankos, but it does ease up the pressure of their bot lane, and their bot lane can do G2 bot lane things like playing Seraphine or Senna or some of these picks that are more supportive and weak side in nature that can carry them through. So good for Broken Blade, good for their bot lane, probably not great for Jankos. But the thing about G2 is it's best of ones, and they're always one badass Caps performance away from taking a win over some of the best teams in the world. And for Dom1 Kia, this is just a massive upgrade, right? This is absolutely huge. You don't have to worry about so much your disconnected bot lane from carrying the game. Canyon is in his element. Good God, Canyon can come back and play as Karthus. He can play Nidalee potentially. He can play the Belveth, the Graves. I mean, Canyon's just going to have a field day in this meta. And hopefully Nogari has kind of gotten his shit together and they can play through some of these carry top laners as well. So I think the danger here for JDG is not that they're not one of the best teams in the world. They certainly are. The danger is that this format is best of ones, and G2 and Dom1 are very unpredictable teams with wacky ass strategies that you are going to have to deal with in best of ones. And you're going to have to deal with both of these teams in your group doing it to you. And a couple of losses against them is going to put you in a very, very rough position. Very rough position. So there's a chance that this team, if JDG was just in best of fives, they may be the world champion. But because they're in this format against these two teams in this group, they may just fall on their face.
The only thing I can say for Evil Genius is this. If you win any games, they're all going to be statement games. So it's a great chance to prove yourself. If you're actually good, Sleeper good, this is the best group to do it in. That's also because there's almost no universe in which you should be able to get out. Unfortunately for you.
Yep. I
mean,
mean,
this is even one where it's literally possible you could go 0-6 and not even be like a laughing stock like TSM was. You could just go 0-6 and actually straight up lose to better teams. Could even play well and go 0-6. It's actually the group of death for them, unfortunately. Only for them, obviously, which is not how the group of death works, just for them specifically.
Yeah, either you're going to take a game off of two of the most famous teams in the world and best teams in Dom1 and JDG, or you're going to finally take your first game that you couldn't get at MSI versus G2, right?
Yes.
So I think JoJo's looked really good. It's a new team that's going to have slightly more time to get synergy. Obviously, this is very accelerated in terms of schedule with you only have 2 days off before you start playing your groups. The question is, do they even play? I think every team plays on the first day.
Looks like it, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, not every team, but they do. They play JDG on day one. Okay, that might be a little rough. Some really fucking sick matchups on day one, though. It's C9 versus Fnatic, G2 versus Dom1. Flying Oyster for 100 is probably the worst game, which is, saying something.
Gives them a chance to start with a win, though.
JD, it does give Flying Oyster a first chance to start with the win. That'll be good for them.
That'll be interesting.
JDG versus EG, T1 versus EDG. That's going to be hype. And Genji versus RNG, also going to be mega hype. Those are all great
games. By the way, here's what's great about the Genji RNG game. If RNG just comes right out and wins a BL1 against Genji, right back on the table. All the hype's back there instantly. One game, turn it all around for you.
Yep.
And Korea will just be mauled in. They'll be fucking the raging behind the scenes, going back to the drawing board. It might actually just bring out the final form.
Yeah, and I don't know how good Flying Oyster is as a team because I have watched exactly 0 of their games, but there's a chance they kind of embarrass 100 Thieves here, right? The PCS teams, LMS teams have always actually pretty much shown up at Worlds. And this is a team with a bunch of players that I am really unfamiliar with, but here's their opportunity to prove themselves. That's probably going to be the weakest group overall. Group D, you would think that Gen G and RNG should be smooth sailing. Easy. Yeah.
Group C is the most interesting one.
Yeah.
That one is a wild group because think about this. Like a lot of people, let's be real, Monty. Most people didn't have the RX making Worlds. So
No.
we can't act like just because they're Korean, they're going to stomp the group.
No, I mean, we haven't talked about them because they're kind of bad.
Yeah, of course. So as a result, but here's the other question I have, though. In light of what you said about the farming junglers, does that nerf Malrang and therefore nerf Rogue?
Possibly.
That's a question, right?
And also Carry Tops, is that really going to be in Rogue's wheelhouse with Odo Omne? That's not how they were winning the title, right? They were playing really hard through their bot lane most of the time with super early game junglers, with Malrang's crazy Jarvan and his weird ass pathing and early ganking and sacrifices to get his lanes ahead. Well, that's not going to be as good any longer. And I trust Malrang. Malrang can always find a way to be weird and to make weird things work for him. So we'll see what innovations they have. We know they've been scrimming significantly before they left Europe.
It's only been one game of Jarvan played in the tournament so far, so
that
would be a bit of a reach
Malrang.
to pick. Would be a bit of a reach to pick that.
That may not stop Malrang. We'll see. His Hecarim, though, that might be a good champ if he can actually get his hands on it. DRX, people will look at DRX 5-0 and play-ins, but I kind of throw out their game versus RNG because, first off, RNG picked Neela, which was a super weird pick because that wasn't a champion that was prioritized during the LPL playoffs, but it was played pretty frequently towards the end of the LCK season and playoffs. It was much more popular there. So DRX would have had much more experience playing against that champion and playing with it than I assume that RNG would have had. Also, remember, there were 2 hours of delays that day.
Yes.
And RNG versus DRX was played after midnight in Mexico City with 2 teams that were probably extremely jet lagged.
Oh, it's wild. Yeah.
And it was their first game on this patch. Look, I'm not going to read into that one too heavily. Yeah, Royal lost, but they did something weird. The time was weird. There was probably jet lag involved. It was the first game on the patch. Like, I'm not buying that yet. I think part of what's good for DRX is that the patch is playing out in a way where we don't see a lot of mid lane bans, which means that Zeka can really power up on champions like Akali and Azir, because Sylas is, has tended to be a little bit more high priority. Kingen can go back to the Ornn if he wants to. That's not a champion that's being banned anymore. And he was very famous for his crazy good Ornn engages and sick flash Ornn ults this season in LCK. And it was banned against DRX for a very, very long time. So it's a fringe meta pick that can be used by them pretty reliably. I was not impressed with some of Kingan's carry champions, but I think that goes without saying. And then the other side of it is Deft is still fucking phenomenal, right? Deft is still super good.
It's just old reliable, mate. He might not be the best anymore, but tell you what, he keeps ticking over, doesn't he?
Yeah, and Barrel's there to provide the shot calling. The question is really their jungle situation, because they spent a lot of games playing Maokai in the jungle, which Pyosik and Juhan were kind of alternating, and then Pyosik had that fucking terrible game versus Mad Lions, where it wasn't just that he got behind due to the set strat in the invade that Mad Lions, put upon him and made it his life difficult. It's that he was literally just straight up missing every Sejuani ult and being completely fucking useless in the team fights, even when, look, you can be underfarmed on Sejuani, just hit your ult, right? Just hit your fucking ult. So I think they got to play Juhan moving forward. He's been much more solid, but I haven't seen a lot of diversity from DRX, is my point. They were really reliant on the Maokai pick in particular. So you want to see something else from DRX if they're actually going to have a shot at making any kind of run here, because they seem pretty one-dimensional in my eyes at the moment.
Also, as much as people are going to look and see top esports, you've been going on about that night guy for so long time, surely they will just 6-0. Listen, I don't trust any LPL teams until we get the best of fives, guys. I have learned, I never trust these guys in fucking group stage, man. They'll just lose a game randomly. They might just lose a game to fucking Rogue or something stupid. Could see it happening. Also,
Top showed in their 2 series against JDG that no lead that they have is unthrowable.
Yes.
That's the scary thing about Top, is that they can get big leads. Will they throw them? Who knows? Also, Wayward, as good as he was in the regular season, he looked nervous and was kind of a lot worse, I would say, during playoffs. And then there's also the Jackie Love coin flip naturally, right? Some games he's just going to giga carry you. Some games he's just going to completely run it down and lose you the game. So there's a lot of variance with top, which I agree with you. Like the variance kind of evens out over a best of 5, but in best of 1s, it can be sad.
And then also think about this. So you've got all these teams that relative to their power level, so obviously tops up here, but then they can be shaky. And then rogues like maybe here with like DRX, but can both be shaky in their own ways. And what team do you insert as the 4th team to just create mayhem? The VCS, please. The VCS to the front desk. Clean up on aisle 4. I hope they come with the true spirit of the VCS, which is the finest Vietnamese cheese. That's just absolutely just give these guys nightmares. I don't know if that a thing actually, because in the UK in comics, if you ate cheese, it would always give you like nightmares or something. That would be like, that's like a trope in old comics. Yeah.
No, I haven't heard that one, but I think the VCS playstyle is probably going to catch people off guard. Like they're like China, how China used to be. They just love fucking fighting. Like they just love it. They play really fast-paced games. They're not afraid of these kind of engages. And if you're not willing to kind of counter them at the pace that they're attacking you, then you may lose some games. And
if you are DRX, for example, it's a lose-lose scenario. If you win, who gives a fuck? It's GAM Esports. If you lose, you lost to GAM Esports. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those ones where I always feel sorry for Koreans. Like, it's just harsh.
I think the plus side to DRX is that they may not have the strongest group of players. And by that, I mean, they're struggling, obviously, with the jungle position. Deft is super good, but they don't really have any other world-class players. You guys will look at Zeka Zakali or Azir, be like, wow, that guy's really good. Yeah, his champion pool that he can do that on are very small. And he'll probably get good champions for him again, because the rest of the pool is we're just not seeing a lot of mid bans right now, especially on the champions that he's good at. And it just opens up Deft, I think, way too much if you start doing that. Like you just don't want to give Deft Kalista. Like you do not want to give DRX Kalista, because if you guys were watching LCK at all, DRX was doing very well at the start of the summer when they were getting Kalista and Ornn every game. They're just smashing people. They are 2-0 over Damwon in best of 3s. That was a very good matchup for them. And their strength is not in their individual players. It's in the fact that they actually have pretty good macro and shot calling. And if you make mistakes, they are really good at capitalizing on those mistakes. You saw that in the Mad Lions game, right? That has happened pretty consistently. But if you overpower them on an individual level, that is how you beat them. That is how you beat this team. I mean, Barrel's still a good shot caller. Like, that hasn't changed. So
some would say there are other teams, you can make up your own mind, that might miss that quality at this point in time because they thought they had it in it. I've given it to obvious. Okay, yeah, you get it. It's all good.
Yeah, and what other groups do we have? Group D, I think Gen.G is still my favorite for the World Championship. We'll get photos.
I really hope they just
in those Tiger jerseys forever.
That's the dream. The dream is they just look super good coming out. First place team, no shenanigans, get like a proper matchup in the quarterfinals, then we're all good. We're all good at that point.
I think they're a lot better than Royal. But best of ones, who knows what's going to happen. That's an exciting matchup. Ruler should still be totally fine in this meta. He doesn't play Draven, but he plays pretty much everything else. And I don't think Gala plays Draven, not that I've seen. So everything else, Gen.G should be good. Their macro, their early game shot calling, their comeback potential. My God, Chovy's champion pool is going to be fucking incredible in this meta, you would have to believe.
I want to see some cheeky pick in the group stage as well. Some just pure banter, just to send the message.
Yeah, I mean, Chovy, it is actually gross how good this meta is for Chovy. I think that's the thing that really pushes it over the top for me, is that you simply are not going to be able to like ban Azir or Silas every single game against Chovy. And if he gets those picks, he will just destroy you.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.